And thank. So welcome to I think this may be our first ever joint affinity group between the Maryland GFOA's retiree group and the Maryland GFOA's pension group. And we figured this topic, kind of having an update on the Maryland state pension, was kind of an ideal uh, topic that would kind of be able to allow us to do one of these joint groups. All of us here are touched, I think, in one way or another by the pension. Either we are finance officers of participating government units in the pension, or state employees, or we are county finance people who are now sending a monthly um, a monthly contribute, or I should say a yearly contribution to the pension due to some changes in state law that happened last year, or we are current or future retirees ourselves of the pension. And I think I'm actually every single one of those. So I'm checking off all of those boxes. And so joining us today is Jonathan Martin. Uh, John is also a member of the GFOA board, although he came into that position before he was the acting director of the state pension. So I'm just going to just briefly just highlight on some of the highlights here. Jonathan D. Martin, acting executive director of the Maryland State Retirement and Pension System. So he has served as chief deputy treasurer of Maryland since 2022. It's more than 20 years of experience in state government and finance operations, and he leads the day-to-day management of the state treasurer's office and its 9 divisions. Of course, in that role, Mr. Martin advises Treasurer Derek Davis on legislative policy, new technologies, long-term operational challenges, and strategic planning. And then, of course, in addition now to all of that, he is also the acting executive director of the state pension, as we're in a bit of a transition period there. So all part of that other duties as assigned. And before I turn it over to him, Marty, do you have anything to say from the retiree perspective before we hand it over to John?
Yes, I think the common question that we get this time of year and probably a little earlier that resulted in requesting that we do this kind of session is, how much what is the cost of living going to be for July 1? And is are the uh, active employees going to get that same amount of money, cost of living, or something different? So I kind of reacted to questions that I was getting from people that I knew, and so we're glad that we could do this today.
We'll, we'll make sure we hit that topic and many others. So with that, John, if you want to take it
Yeah.
over, and then we can however you want to work it. If you want to take questions, while you're speaking, or we can just wait till the end and then we can kind of have some Q&A. So it's however you're most comfortable.
Nope. Good morning, everyone. Please feel free to ask questions as we go throughout. We will touch on the retiree COLA, and then I can speak a little bit to the state employees COLA that they got this year. But what I'm going to walk you through is we call this the popular annual financial report. It is from 2025, but I think it is a very nice way at a high level to talk about what is going on at the pension system. And there's a lot of interesting data. I come from a budget background, so I always like seeing data and populations and those types of things. And I should note, Robbie is a member of the board, so he can certainly correct me or guide me in certain things to talk about if he wants to. But let me just get started, and then we'll kind of feel free to jump in. So really, this is on our website, and it's kind of a summary of our annual financial report. And there'll be a link at the end, and there's multiple years. So to save you from reading 200 pages, we've condensed it to about 13 slides here. So this just goes through looking at the total membership of this pension system right now. And this is across the board, teachers, PGUs, employees. You can see the total membership is over 400,000. And then you can see that breakdown between active and benefit recipients. There are more active members than benefit recipients. And then on the right-hand side, it walks you through by system, kind of where everybody is located, the average age, the average years of service, and the average salary. So I found this very interesting myself just to see where everybody is. And you can see the total average is about 46.5 years for the active members, and the average salary is 79, almost 80,000. But again, that varies across the membership. Judges are higher, teachers, there's multiple systems and how those are paid as well. So this is kind of a broad overview of who all is in our system, and for the actives at least. On the next page, this is really looking more now at the retirees. Um, so the average individual has about 22.8 years of service at retirement, and the final salary is about 57.6. Um, most of the beneficiaries live in the state, so $5 billion was how much the system paid out in 2025. And I think many of you as financial officers know that's one of the larger social benefit programs in the entire state, if you think about it. So there's a lot of money going out, and about 80% of that money actually stays here in Maryland. I know we all hear a lot about flight from the state because of taxes or whatever else. But it's interesting here again to see how much of the money actually stays in Maryland. And then again, on the right-hand side, you can kind of see by system where people are, their average age, and the average monthly benefit um, per individual. So again, just interesting information just to talk a little bit about who we serve. On the next page, you can see the number of retirements by fiscal year. And there you have the COVID pandemic. So you can kind of see um, perhaps as people had to go back to work or were told, I know that happened here at the treasurer's office. We had a large number of retirements once kind of work from home ended. But you can kind of see usually it's in the 7,000 range for the number of retirements by fiscal year. It does fluctuate, and there's all kinds of economic factors that go into that. Um, how are benefits funded? So I found this interesting as well. As you would probably expect, most of the money comes from net investment income. And then obviously there's the employers and members contribution that all go into it. But investment income is about 56% of the total amount of money that goes out. I would note as well, recent legislation, we do actuarial funded. So we're doing the full amount that we're required to, the required annual contribution. So that is both for the employers and the employees are contributing those amounts of money. But again, for that 5 billion we're paying out, here's kind of how it gets split out. Schedule of funding progress. So there's a lot of bars and numbers on this chart. I think the one that's probably the most relevant is the number or the line at the top that shows the funded ratio. And you can see how it's been working its way up, particularly in 21 and 22 when there was the run up in the market. And then in 23 and thereafter, it's kind of gone down a little bit. Really, there's two main things that are driving liability in the funded status. One is obviously what happens in the markets and investment returns. And then the other thing is what is happening to liabilities. And by that, I mean what is happening with salary decisions, which are, as you see from the number of different systems that happens at the local education level, participating government units, and then state government. And we know that the COLA for retirees went up in 22. I think it was 22. And then there was a lot of salary increases as well as teacher salaries because of the blueprint trying to get the bottom end of teacher salaries up. I should note as well when we look at the funded levels, we do what's called smoothing for investment returns. So if there's a loss that's carried over, I believe it's 3 years, 3 or 4 years, and then gains are also carried out over 3 or 4 years. So you never recognize it all in one year, but this chart, I think, reflects kind of where we're at. And you can see there's close to 100 billion at the end of 25 in liabilities, and we're at about at this point, we're up to closer to 80 billion in assets. The market obviously has done relatively well. So um, there's still the long-term commitment to funding the pension system. Um, that stays. How that gets paid for, there are cost shifts that Robbie mentioned in terms of the teacher liability and who's picking up those costs, but ultimately it's still fully funded. And you can see here kind of the growth over time, both in assets and liabilities. That's probably the one that people are most interested in. This is another really interesting chart, and we talked a little bit about how much of the money stays in Maryland that the system puts out. It's close to 4 billion, and here we've broken it down by county in terms of the money that is put back, that's distributed throughout the state. 4 billion almost is a lot of money, and you can kind of think about the economic impact that has then across the state. Not surprising, Baltimore County has a lot of the most amount of money. Then, you go to some of the other larger counties that also have significant amount of money going in. Baltimore County also has the most number of retirees. So if you want to know where retirees are, again, this is a good place to identify and see that information. And then where else do retirees live? And I don't think the list on the right-hand side really would be surprising to anybody when you consider Florida is the next highest after Maryland. Delaware is maybe not as high as you might have expected. And then North Carolina, South Carolina, and West Virginia. So, it is still, money is still staying in the mid-Atlantic, but yeah, again, I think this is a very interesting chart to kind of know where people are and where the money is going. Investment portfolio. So this focuses in a little bit more on the returns. For the fiscal year end 2025, the investment portfolio generated a return of 9.83% net of fees. This was greater than what the policy benchmark was, which was 9.54. The system uses a discount rate or an assumed rate of return of 6.8%. So you can kind of see too over the past 20 years how we've done relative to the policy benchmark, but also against that 6.8%, which is kind of our funded where we want to try to target our returns towards. So overall, you can kind of see the light green bar is longer, so to say, than the policy benchmark. So the system has been outperforming. And again, this kind of relates back to what we talked about with what's going on with the funded ratio, where we do seem to be beating 6.8%, at least for the last 10 years, but our funded ratio is a little bit more middling and trending down a little bit, and that has as much to do with liabilities. How is the money invested? This is a big pie chart with lots of different asset categories. Um, and I would just say in the past year to 18 months, the system has gone through a review of this asset allocation. And you'll see the category here of absolute return. The system has voted because there hasn't been great return in that area to eventually over time zero that out and increase the amount of money going into growth and equity. Um, we haven't been as heavy as other systems in the equity, public equity in particular. So when we look at ourselves compared to other systems, our returns might not have been as great, because we haven't been as exposed to public equities, which have really gone up. As we all know, the big 4 or 5 companies that have been driving things the last couple of years. Um, when it comes to investing, we do have a new CIO that started in January. Her name is Diane Sandoval. She has a lot of experience having worked in CalPERS and Australia with one of the largest healthcare unions there. And at this point, the system is going through a review of its investment strategy. Diane comes from a background of investment strategy called total portfolio, which is tries to think more holistically about the investment strategy rather than the silos of individual asset classes, and really thinking about where's the best dollar to invest at that point in time. So it's a little bit more intended to be dynamic. CalPERS has gone to this model, and not a lot, a few other international institutions have gone through that. So the board is going through that discussion right now. No final decisions have been made at this point, but there is conversations going about this total portfolio approach and how that may change things. I think it's more of a how you think about investing as opposed to anything too dramatic. You're still going to have kind of the asset classes that you're investing in, and it will have targets, but it's more trying to be nimble and dynamic as the market changes so you can make quick changes to maximize value. Hopefully nobody has too many more investment questions. That's about all I have on that, but we'll find our way through. Um, COLA. So the COLA this year is 2.698%. The reason this was a little bit of a longer process was the COLA is based upon CPI. In the month of, I can't remember offhand if it was October or November, one of those months, the administration at the federal level did not produce a number for CPI. So we actually had to go in and put in legislation to try to account for that, because it says in the law it's 12 months. We went back and forth with our actuaries to figure out the best way to approximate what would be a 12-month calculation. Um, there was lots of math scenarios and everything, but what we were able to do in the law is to change it to most closely approximate what the COLA had been in prior years. So again, this year's COLA rate is 2.698. And then for the math people, this will also impact next year's COLA rate, because you have to deal with the numerator and the denominator. So it's kind of a 2-year fix that we came up with.
Legacy.
And this will go in effect July 1st for those people. As you are aware too, the COLA for some people is bifurcated as part of pension reform. And so there are some people that would have their COLA capped at 2.5% in a year when the system's investment fund achieves its assumed actual rate of return, which is at 6.8. So for this year, like we talked about, we did beat the 6.8, so it would be the 2.5%. And then the third bullet, it doesn't reply to all of retirees, and there you can see the teacher's retirement system. So that is the COLA for regular state employees. Just their COLA for the year this year, I believe, was 1.5%. At the state level, the budget is constrained for a number of reasons. So a couple of years ago, there were large salary increases, and they're much more in line with the cost of living, or a little bit less, due to budgetary pressures. That is kind of the summary of the system at a high level. We have a lot of initiatives going on as it relates to customer service. We will continue to put things out in the mail. I know previously there have been decisions to kind of go to a more of electronic format, but um, I'm still a paper person, so I can appreciate wanting to get paper in hand. But our system, we are moving to put more and more things online through MySRPS. It is a great tool to kind of, particularly for active members, to see where you're at with your benefit and what you've accrued. And I would strongly encourage folks who are active members to once a year go in and make sure everything's right. And for retirees, it has a wealth of information. Our member services, as Robbie knows, we've made a lot of progress in terms of our customer service and timeliness with answering phone calls. There's obviously always work to be done, but we are here to serve our members and to do the best we can. We introduced an AI chatbot as a way to help people as well. So we are trying to leverage technology while also providing opportunities for people to call us directly. So it will be interesting to kind of see what this year's actuarial liability report shows. That should come out more in the September, October timeframe. And we will produce this popular annual financial report as well at that time. So feel free to go onto our website and look for the shortened version as opposed to the full financial report. But I think it will give you a nice snapshot as to where we're at with the system, um, and where money is going and how it impacts you. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions that you all might have, or yeah,
Sure,
have a
you
conversation.
know, and again, feel free to jump in, but I can kind of start. So obviously the pension systems dealing with a lot of money, but also a lot of personal information, kind of all across the board. Maybe kind of just touch a little bit on some of the cybersecurity initiatives that the system has in order to both protect those financial assets as well as those PIA assets, if you will.
Sure. So we do have an internal auditor, and it does feel like we're constantly being audited, whether it be by the legislative auditors or outside auditors or the internal auditor. So I would say, compared to other agencies I've been at, we take seriously public information and the members' information we have. And part of that is we're really trying to move towards, like many people, cloud-based systems as opposed to the mainframe systems. That's been an ongoing effort, but we're also constantly evaluating what we're doing and opportunities for improvement. Um, I can't get in, I don't know the specifics of everything, but we do have a cybersecurity person, staff person on site who keeps us in line. And the big thing, quite honestly, at this point, as you can imagine, is AI policy. In a lot of ways, that's driven by state government and the Department of Information and Technology. And that's an evolving field. Obviously, it's constantly changing. But I think our cyber people would say at this point that is probably the greatest risk is AI and how bad actors may be using that to get into our system. So it is a challenge to stay on the front foot. Um, but that's why, in some ways, logging on to my SRPS the first time is a little bit cumbersome or may feel that way. It's partly for these very controls to make sure bad actors aren't getting in and being able to manipulate information or steal information, quite honestly.
And I know we have a lot of people here that are members of the system themselves, as well as people that are working with them in a professional status. So from like on a personal level, as you kind of go through your years of being an active member, like how best should we be interacting with the state retirement system, and at what point do we really need to make sure that we got everything in order before we do make that decision to retire.
Yeah, like I said, my SRPS I think is a great resource. I know I used to get every year, and we all did once a year in the mail, the Bible, which was kind of our beneficiary statement and where we were. Now that is available online, and you can run scenarios for yourself if you'd like to. If you're at 20 years and you think you may want to do early retirement at 25 years, you can kind of see what that would look like under different scenarios. So I think it's critical as an active employee just to make sure all the information is up to date in terms of your employment history and that you know where you're at. And then typically, I think we suggest starting about 2 years out from where you think you're going to retire to begin kind of going through process and thinking about it and talking to people, whether it's your own financial advisor or folks at SRA. But really, a year out is from there is when you should start getting your papers together and engaging with us to make sure everything goes smoothly as you move forward. And obviously, we also deal with beneficiaries who may have passed and or members who have passed and what to do with their beneficiaries. And in those cases, please just contact us and we'll help you and your families walk through what all needs to be done. That is part of our jobs in the customer service. So.
Yeah, and I believe we also kind of have some seminars, that are generally kind of throughout the year that people that are getting ready to retire. A lot of weird little moving parts that sometimes people don't necessarily think about. What time of year do you retire in order to get that full year of service? How will your sick leave, if that's available, kind of factor into your years of service, and what can't do. A lot of things, earning limitations, things along the lines of that you can't kind of go back to your same employer and make above a certain amount, but you can go to different employers and lots of things like that. You talk about individuals that choose to live, in different states. There might in fact though be, if I believe when you do, say go into a different state, you might not get the benefit of that tax credit that you get. Be, you know, when we make our employee contributions to the system, those are taxable. But I believe that when we start drawing benefits, there's a credit against it and something like that. So again, a lot of those, there's a lot of things to kind of, those are just some real little things, but they can be important. And I think it's why it's good to take advantage of those seminars, or to reach out and use the simulators and all of those things. Let's see. Do we have other questions? Marty, like, what are some of the big things that a lot of the retirees are? I mean, other than the COLA, that are kind of some of their other concerns.
One of the questions was, if you don't make your investment goals, how does that affect the COLA? The COLA is going to be 2.698%, but what if you don't make the investment goal?
Right. So there's kind of two different groups of people, and that starts from pension reform in 2011, where for the active people, moving forward, their COLAs would be capped at 2.5%, and that is related to how the investment returns are. But like we talked about earlier with this group on this page, if you've been retired and you're not a part of the 2011 system and those changes, then your COLA is what your COLA is going to be as calculated. Um, it really has no bearing on the system's rate of return or anything else. So again, what's a little bit unique about the Maryland system is we have so many different plans that we're accounting for. In a lot of states, the teacher system is its own system and employees are their own systems. And here it's all combined. And there's been a lot of legislative changes to benefits and other types of things. So it can be a little bit confusing. But for most retirees, I would say, this is going to be the 2.698, and whatever the inflation calculation will be, then that's what the number will be. It's more people of my generation or people who have maybe retired since 2011 that may be more impacted by the second group, which is in pension reform, which is after 2011. The rate of return will have an impact on what level of COLA you would get, and then it is capped at 2.5%. So, you wouldn't be able to get the 2.698% that other retirees got this year under the new system. We try to make it really complicated for folks, as I guess is what I would say.
Okay, that answers that question, and I think Robbie is right. The retirement seminars were a tremendous help, and they were really responsive to people's comments that they wish they knew a lot of the information earlier than when they were getting it. They were getting it in the year of retirement or 5 years before, and they wish they could have planned earlier. And now they're doing those retirement sessions earlier. So I think that really was a popular thing to do and well received. There was one item when I retired that I was kind of taken by surprise at where there was no information on it. I was a member of the Maryland Army National Guard for 6 years, and everybody kind of knew that you would get some kind of retirement credit for active duty, which generally is 6 months. But no one ever made a comment on the other 5.5 years that you served in the National Guard of Maryland. And there was a credit for that, which was, a total surprise, but it's not shown anywhere easily. You don't really see that written anywhere. And it was a pleasant surprise, and I think it was great. And but you just don't see it. And until I was ready to retire, I didn't know about it.
No, I think there's a lot of moving pieces for individuals, and no one individual is going to have the same retirement as somebody else.
Right.
Certainly, I think we can do a better job, like you said, of servicing people before they get into retirement, and making sure they have access to information. And I will take that back to the team. But again, too, I think like we've been talking about that active enrollment and checking the website and seeing where you're at, people may be able to ask questions and have caught that before, but certainly we can do a better job of letting people know about all the different service credits available to them. It's like I said, it's a big system with a lot of different individual plans, so it kind of makes it challenging to provide all the information to everybody.
In my case, it was a very happy surprise.
Well, I'm always happy for happy surprises.
Well, if you're still eligible to enlist, there's a
There we
promotion
go.
to do so. Um, so one of the things I always kind of hear from people out there is concern about the fees that we pay to investors for managing some of the money. Obviously, a lot of it's just passive investments and things like that, and it's not a whole lot. But like on the private equity side, in exchange for getting better results, or perceived better results, or maybe better risk hedging, we do pay higher fees. Understanding that's a little bit of the kind of the cost of doing business, but to what extent? And this is, I know, probably more of a Diane question, but what are some of the safeguards that we do to, like, as an organization to make sure that our fees are in line with kind of not paying more than we should?
Sure. Diane, our CIO, is the better person. I do think too, this is an ongoing conversation of internal management versus external management. And that's something the board will be talking about moving forward, because as you do internal management, you can save money on the fees. I would say the biggest thing we try to do at the board level, at least, is to be transparent about what we're doing with the fees and to be mindful of it. Um, and then also looking at what the return is and whether or not we're getting that benefit. We have consultants and other people that help to advise us to make sure that we're in line, and they talk to the investment committee both about what's going on in private equity, because it has been a little bit of a challenging couple of years for private equity, um, and then just looking at our fees. But I can just say there's lots of questions and interest in fees, both from the public as Robbie is asking it now. So the board is very aware of it, and I would say it's just an ongoing conversation to keep things in line and that the staff are aware of everybody's position, I guess, as it relates to fees and trying to maximize every dollar for the system. So that's my way of saying I'm not quite sure how to answer your question, Robbie, but I know there's an emphasis of looking at it.
No, and yeah, and I think that's again that you're kind of trying to look at that overall return. Oftentimes when we get those numbers, they're net of fees. So when we're examining all of that, but I get it. It's one of those things where it's like, why are we paying this much? And sometimes you can have investment vehicles that you're paying more than you should, and you can get it cheaper. And other times you're paying this premium because only this one particular firm or outfit has this type of investment in this type of field and all of that, and kind of wading through all that. But yes, the organization has been taking a lot more stuff in house, and doing it with in essence kind of state employees versus outside. And obviously this is a retirement system. It's all about retirement, but the organization has had a lot of retirements itself. I know you've been dealing with kind of turnover and just retirements of some key individuals. Just kind of touching base on how the system is managing that type of internal turnover, so that we can continue providing the services to all the other retirees.
Yeah, I mean, as we're talking today, it's complex understanding the benefits. And every system is unique and the law is constantly changing. And I guess that's what I've been most struck by since my time as the acting executive director. We spend a lot of time talking about investments and that $80 billion and how we're going to do it. And it is important. But what's equally as important and is a larger part of the state retirement system is people who can answer these complicated questions and provide accurate information, and then being able to understand the nuances and again, answer people's questions and make sure the right amount of money is going out the door that people have rightly earned. So I think it sounds cliched, but one thing we're really looking at is salaries so we can try to be competitive and retain our staff. And there's just a lot of things we're trying to do internally for retention and career growth paths and those types of things. As Robbie knows, our benefits administrator, who'd been with the system for 40 years, is retiring. And you just can't replace somebody with that type of knowledge. And that will be a loss, but I think we're working hard and diligently to build up people behind them to be able to step up, and then obviously trying to leverage technology where we can to make things a little bit easier so you don't have to know the nuances of an Excel spreadsheet or those types of things. It can become a little bit more standardized for everybody. But it is a challenge, keeping people and making sure they understand all the nuances. For our member services, for example, there's kind of a 6-month training that they have to go to be able to understand everything about each of the different systems and being able to answer your questions. But um, there's a lot to it. I mean, in some ways, it's a little bit like retiree health insurance or Medicaid or anything else that you're applying for. There's lots of rules that are very specific. So we really have to work on spending more time investing in those types of people so that they can best serve our members. So it is a challenge. Investments is also a challenge, and just being competitive with the private sector. Um, but there's lots of people out there that do investing. There's not as many people that know the ins and outs of law enforcement retirement policy. So it's just a little trickier.
And you speak about retirement health. That's kind of one of the other duties also kind of assigned of the state pension system, is that you're managing the OPEB,
Mhm.
the OPEB trust assets as well. And there's probably there's a lot of overlap with some other things of money of other types of retirement systems and the like. So again, um, a lot of moving parts and different things that might have a little bit different investment goals or have different benefit payout structures. And the like, and that's I guess one of the challenges of running at one point a combined system, but one with many offshoots and all.
Yep.
So,
So you're getting involved with the health insurance and prescription plans and the other benefits
No, that's
that
a hard no.
that retirees get.
No, I think what Robbie's referring to is the other post-employment benefits trust. We, I think that's a little, maybe close to $1 billion now that's being set aside for future obligations. It's not very well funded, maybe at 2% of the total liability, but we are responsible for investing those funds. DBM would still be the ones who are running the insurance program for the state. And then we work with them and our local partners just to kind of make sure everybody who's eligible to get money is getting their money. But for state employees, retirees, that really is dealing more with DBM. I'm happy to give that to them. We have enough problems to deal with at retirement. So
don't sign up for that one.
yeah, no, that's like I said, that's a
Just
hard
manage the
no.
money. It's enough
Yeah.
headaches there, but yeah, administering retirement health. I mean, because I deal a little bit with that. Although mostly it's HR, it's a lot of challenges, there. And obviously, the states had some very high profile changes over the years
Yep.
with their system. Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions? I know at some point in the past we've had the former chief investment officer, Andy Palmer, give a presentation, to the entire Maryland GFOA board, and I've been kind of waiting for our new CIO to kind of get her feet under her before asking her to do that. But I know that's certainly one of the things we'll be interested in at some later date in the future of having her kind of present the portfolio and all of that. And again, that's so we've definitely had a lot of people from the system speak to us over the years. I know we've also had some members of the state retirement pension team speak to us about real estate investment and infrastructure investment and a couple other things. So state retirement has been a good friend of the Maryland GFOA, and I know we're excited about having them become more and more active in it at a staff level as well. A lot of overlap there and all. So, well, with that, I know we booked this for 2 hours, but we didn't figure it would go that long. And if there aren't any other questions about anything else, we can let you go and have the rest of your morning for other duties as assigned.
If there are no other questions, I do have a sidebar kind of state of Maryland question for John in his capacity as Chief Deputy Treasurer that one of the agencies has asked me.
Sure.
And I wanted to get his response, but it's not related to retirement. Just go.
I mean, yeah. I mean, unless it's confidential information,
No,
we could,
one of the agencies said that there was an outside organization that was looking for an IRS letter stating that the agency was it was tax exempt, but was part of the state of Maryland. And the latest letter they could find was 2009, and they were not happy. The vendor was not happy with that date of letter, and they're wondering if there's something newer around, and if so, where would it be? Would that reside in Treasury or General Accounting or?
I was just going to say, off the top of my head, I would say that's more the general accounting and the comptroller's office. We're at the treasurer's office, we're more the bank. We facilitate payments, but I know they're the ones that deal more with the IRS. So I would probably direct that agency back to general accounting and the
That
comptroller's
I
office.
suggested Chief of General Accounting.
Yep. I think that
Very
makes the
good.
most sense.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. If there aren't anything else, you all have a nice weekend. Looks like we got another nice summer weekend in front of us. So, I of course hope to see many of you down at Ocean City in a couple of days for the summer conference. So take
Thank you
care.
so much, John, for
Thank
your
you all.
presentation.
No problem. Take care, everyone.